How's it going, guys? White Rabbit here. I'd like to talk to you all today about my testimony. Now, I know I've mentioned briefly in the past a little bit about myself and my upbringing through the Catholic Church, but I'd like to go a little bit more in depth, I think, and explain for you all briefly a little bit about my past, how I got into conspiracies, and ultimately how I ended up being born again. So, let's get into it. Now, like I've told you all before, I was brought up in a very Catholic household. I went to private school all the way up through high school. I went to Mass at least once a week. And my mother was even the lead cantor at our church. So I was heavily indoctrinated with the whole Catholic theology from a very young age. Now, through that time, I began to sense certain things about the Catholic Church that I did not agree with. I remember even at a very young age having difficulty comprehending why telling my sins to the priest was necessary. I also had a very difficult time wrapping my head around communion. You see, even at a very young age, although I could not put my finger on it, I could feel that something was off. Something wasn't right. And I think it was in combination with this hesitancy that I had going to Mass, mixed with the fact that it didn't really feel like a choice to me, as I had been brought up and raised that way my entire life. I think those two things came together and really turned me off to Christianity as a whole. As I got older, and I continued moving further and further away from the Catholic faith, I began to also build up resentment towards it. And I eventually came to a point where I started to identify as an atheist. Now, by the time I got to college, I really started to rebel. And during my rebellion, I really indulged in just about everything you could think of. I began drinking heavily, and I'm ashamed to say I was a bit of a man whore in college. I was totally consumed by the sins of the flesh. Now, throughout my time with college, I also began to suffer from depression. I became very depressed as the years progressed, and in turn indulged in that sinful lifestyle even more in an attempt to pull me out of my own depression. The sad reality of it was that it always made me even more depressed. And so ultimately, it was just a vicious cycle that I was caught in. During this time, I also began to see things that I couldn't explain, things that I now identify as a demonic spirit or energy. And I found myself unable to retain the position of atheist. So I decided to consider myself agnostic. Anyway, by my 5th year in college, my depression deepened and I actually became a full-blown alcoholic. I was at a point where I was drinking so much on a regular basis that if I were to even attempt to drink that much today, it would probably kill me. At that point in my life, I usually had a blood alcohol content of 0.3 and above. And to put that in perspective for you, the legal limit here in America is 0.08. And supposedly somewhere between 0.3 and 0.4 is a lethal dose. So I was going through a handle of vodka every other day, at least. Now, when you're in that much depression and you're that much of an alcoholic, pretty soon even the alcohol isn't enough. And so I ultimately turned to harder drugs. I became severely addicted to cocaine and ecstasy at that point, and eventually turned to meth. Now, folks, I don't think I need to tell you that I was in some pretty bad shape. At that point, I was about 6 foot and weighed about 120 pounds. I dropped out of college. I lost my job. I mean, I had it bad. And that was when I first had a come to Jesus moment, if you will. And I prayed, and I asked God for help. And you know what? He answered my prayer. He answered my prayer in a way that I wasn't even expecting. And the way all of the puzzle pieces fell together, folks, was an absolute miracle. It really was. There's no other way to put it. I ended up meeting the love of my life. I moved to the other side of the country and gradually got better and better. Now, jumping forward a little bit, I eventually stumbled upon some of these conspiracies, namely 9/11, and down the rabbit hole I went. I completely submerged myself in this stuff. My whole world was flipped upside down. You guys know how it is. And I honestly started to think that I was going crazy. I thought it was a side effect of the drugs that I had done. And I became very insecure. And so I remember I was sitting in my car one day, and again I prayed. And I asked God if I was going crazy or if everything that I was discovering was true. And folks, God actually spoke to me. It was the most incredible, amazing thing you could ever imagine. And He answered me so simply and yet so profoundly. It was just incredible. He told me exactly what I needed to hear in that moment, and I'll never forget it. He said, "You're on the right track." It was so perfect because it applied to so many different areas of my life. And it was such a perfect answer because on the one hand, it let me know that I was on the right track with these conspiracy stuff that I was learning and reassured me that I wasn't going crazy. And it was also a word of encouragement for me as I was moving away from alcohol and drugs. And folks, ever since that moment, there has not been a doubt in my mind that I was praying to the right God. There was never any doubt from that moment on that Jesus Christ was my Lord and Savior, and that He loved me and cared about me. Folks, I have never stepped foot in an AA meeting in my life, and yet somehow I am completely sober. Not only that, I don't even think about alcohol or drugs anymore. It's unbelievable. Something that used to totally consume every thought I ever had is now all but a distant memory. And since my little talk with God in the car, I've also made all kinds of breakthroughs in my research and discoveries about how everything works, and all of my questions have been answered in the most elegant order, and it's all making sense now. I'm happier than I've ever been. I'm healthier than I've ever been, and I felt in a way obligated to make this channel and help others not only answer the questions that so many of us have in this whole conspiracy realm, but also to let you guys know that it's not the end of the world. I mean, it is, but it doesn't have to be a negative thing per se. I look at it as Bible prophecy being fulfilled. And while I will adamantly oppose the New World Order for the rest of my life, I still have this inner peace within me that tells me that everything's going to be okay. Everything makes sense now, guys. And I'm telling you, if you let Jesus Christ into your heart, He will reveal some amazing things to you. So there you go, guys. That's a little bit about myself. That's kind of my testimony there. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Hopefully I didn't drag it on too long there. Obviously I didn't have time to get into too much detail, but, I've also had encounters with demons and demonic energy and poltergeist activity and all kinds of stuff that I didn't really feel was appropriate for this video, but maybe in a future video I'll get into some of that stuff. But hopefully this video got to one of you guys at least, and, hopefully it spoke to somebody on a deep level. Hopefully this can be an inspiration to one of you. I also want to let you guys know that I'm going to be out of town for the next week or so. I'm going to visit my wife's family up in California, so I won't be able to upload videos for the next week and a half or 2 weeks or so. But I do have some things in the works that I'm very excited about. I think you guys are really going to be pleased when I get back. I have a lot of collaborations in the works and several videos kind of on the back burner that I'm just waiting to get to. So look forward to that. If you haven't Make sure that you subscribe to my second channel, The Hatter. I'll leave a link for that in the description below. I just uploaded a video onto that channel a couple days ago about the new movie Snowpiercer that recently came out, so make sure you check that out. And besides that, if you haven't already, please like and subscribe. If you guys have a similar testimony or anything like that and you want to leave it in the comments down below, that would be really cool. I'd love to kind of hear from you guys and hear some of your stories. Anyway, thanks and God bless.